me. Somebody's praying. Somebody's praying. Somebody's praying for me.
Thank you, Reverend Blair. There's a couple things that are very special about this morning. One is that Jim Sostecki and Dennis Smith came here at 7 o'clock this morning to make sure we don't have parking spaces. That's super. Thank you. I also think it's interesting that the word for today is healing, because we do have a healing for this church today. For the last 3 months, we've been looking for a new minister, and today we agreed to hire Reverend Robyn. So effective December 1st, Robyn will be our senior minister. And as a preview, as we've been seeing for the last few months, our guest speaker today is none other than Reverend Robyn. Welcome, our new minister.
Okay, the clicker.
It's about time.
I am just delighted and honored to be your new senior minister and to join in this journey together. And I think prayer is a good way to start any relationship. What do you think? So let us return to that space of knowing our oneness and holiness with God as we give thanks. We say, thank you, Spirit, for this divine appointment as a spiritual community. We open to your guidance, your love, and give thanks in advance for a joyful, inspirational, connected, abundant, and prosperous journey together that heals, blesses, prospers, and amplifies the light within each person, within each home, those here and those on the way. May we be the light together and have joy in the journey. Amen. Amen. Thank you. So what is the best way to pray? Didn't know you get a pop quiz the first day, right?
Dancing?
Yes. Well, 3 ministers were sitting around at a picnic bench. And they were discussing the best prayer positions. And a telephone repairman was working nearby. And the first one said, kneeling, that's the best prayer position. Another one said, oh no, I get the best results standing with my hands stretched out to heaven. And the third said, you're both wrong. The most effective way to pray is face down, lying on the ground, prostrate. And the telephone repairman, who couldn't help overhearing, said to them, hey fellas, the best praying I ever did was hanging upside down from the telephone pole. So what is the best way to pray? The best way to pray is the way that connects you to Source in that moment. And that might be different for one day, from one day to the next. And praying in the way that eases anxiety and has the worries subside gives you calm and peace, a sense of blessed assurance that you're not alone. That is the best way to pray for you. And sometimes when we feel like we are hanging upside down in life, or our lives are upside down, sometimes help is a complete prayer. Have you noticed?
Yes.
I remember when I was newly divorced with a single parent with 2 little kids, and I was feeling completely overwhelmed. And they were taking a nap one afternoon, and I was just having a meltdown. You know, how am I going to do this? How am I going to afford this? Just crying, crying out to God. And after a while, I stopped because I noticed something in the room. And I could feel as if these giant hands were picking me up, lifting me up. And it startled me. Stop crying, just startled me. And I was held like that for a few moments. And I had this inner feeling that everything would be okay. And of course it was. Eventually. But in that moment, there was that peace in knowing that I could let go and trust. So help, thanks, wow. It can be as simple as that. Author Annie Lamott has a book, and she calls those 3 essential prayers: help, thanks, and wow. I think unity fits in the last 2, right? Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Spirit. Thank you for all the blessings in my life that have been, that are here now, that are on the way. Thank you in advance for that perfect right relationship. Thank you for my family. The thanks. And then the wow, the statements of truth, like, wow, I am, you are, we are one with the one that is a life, substance, abundance. We'll call it God, Spirit, Buddha, Atman, loving presence, creator, higher self. There are many ways to pray. Many positions, many words. And I kind of see those all like on-ramps to the same interstate or interstate with a destination of union. The words, the postures, they're the vehicles that get us to that place. So prayer and community, that's what we're talking about today. And prayer, as we know, strengthens community. It's been called the oxygen of the soul that feeds us even when we're not aware of it. So I thought today, next, we would become super aware of it. And consider this, that this room is alive with prayer, with the energy of prayer, with the songs, with the prayers, with the vibration from the bowls, with the prayer request, and vibrating in the prayer box, and within the chambers of your heart, too. That this room is alive with prayer. Spirit is active and alive right here, right now, in this room. I think I hear it. Sometimes we forget, like fish in the water, we're immersed in it. In God, we live, move, and have our being. And then also consider in this building, there are at least two other churches right now where people are singing and praying and opening to divine inspiration, connecting in community, and spiritual community. across the lane, across the street, across the whole city, across North County. This is happening from the Catholic Mission all the way down to Swamis, chanting, singing, praying, yogis on mats, breathing out peace, monks chanting. This is an invisible, powerful community of prayer right now that we are part of. We forget sometimes, don't we? But that's good to remember when we're at home, when we're feeling alone, like the only person in the world, to tap into that invisible, powerful community of prayer that is happening, not just here, but all over the world. Okay, I think I skipped some slides. Oh, that's next. Okay. So just to rest in that awareness that there is this community of prayer that we know of and far beyond our conscious mind that we can join at any time. And how great it is we get to do it here on Sunday as a group. Yeah, I feel the joy in this room this morning too. And I loved also that when I pulled in, all this area, and thank you guys for setting that up, all of the churches, all of our cars are together today too, out there in the parking lot. You are the light of the world. A city that is set on a hill cannot be hidden. And Jesus knew that as a broadcast of light, we become the living prayer. We become the living prayer that keeps extending community. I think of the Fillmores who started with a prayer circle in their living room. And their friends and neighbors, they would go to different churches, Methodist, Episcopal, Presbyterian. But at the Fillmores, they would gather together and pray and sit in the silence. And as word got out, that living room got pretty full, pretty crowded. And then the word was passed on for people to tune in from your living room at a certain time of day to join in this prayer. And that still happens at Silent Unity. And one thing I learned at the conference we just went to is that the prayer vigil chapel where the prayers are held, a very sacred place. Has anyone ever been in there? You can almost feel it, can't you? Yeah, those years of prayer in there. Well, now you can go online and enter it virtually and then there's this little pulse, like a heartbeat, to just sit. And you're in a community, a virtual community of people praying all over the world. And it's beautiful. So prayer, it connects us to each other and it extends community, our sense of community too. But we have to be willing to go beyond our comfort zone sometimes, don't we? I remember the first time I was challenged to do that, I had a neighbor, and she had come back from some kind of church camp, and she was on fire with, wow, her life had changed, very zealous, and I was happy for her, and I was new in Unity, and I was still learning about affirmative prayer. And she kept trying to get me to come to her church to be saved because she wanted me to have that experience too. And while I was happy for her, but the energy was a little overwhelming for me. So I found myself, confession, avoiding her. I would look out the window to see, to make sure she wasn't walking by when I would go out there. And then one night, it was really hot in Sacramento. I was watering my lawn at night, and she comes walking by. And she comes walking right up, and she says, "Can I pray with you?" And part of me just gulped like, oh. What is this going to be like, you know? And so, but something in me said, yes, let's do it. So I put down the hose and we held hands. And she said the most beautiful prayer of both of us knowing God more, to know God more. She spoke of how loved we were by God. And it was so beautiful. And I realized all those years ago that, you know, what divides us is the personality, being, quote, right about the right way to do something. But when we join in prayer, we just take the escalator up, all above personality, and go to spirit, where there is no division. So we expand our awareness of a prayerful community when we go beyond our comfort zone. And we can do this silently too. You know, I think of holidays are coming up, and is there someone that you try not to sit next to? And there's a way to prepare, or pre-prayer, to hold, what if you could hold them in the light? Just hold them in the light, bless them. Even if you don't agree with them, or, you know, don't admire them. They've been a challenge for you. Try holding them in the light, blessing them. You are a child of God. I behold the Christ in you. You are loved. Try that and see what happens. Come back and tell me about your experience too. I used to do that when I taught school, when kids would act out, and I would go up and down the rows. I behold the Christ in you. I behold the Christ in you. In my mind. And one of three things would happen. They would get transferred to somebody else's class. They would move, or they would just stop, you know, just stop acting out. It was like a miracle. I thought I had found the secret. So going beyond our comfort zone of who we include in prayer, that's something we can do. Perhaps there's something within us that remembers and longs for that vast love from which we came. And we touch that in prayer and in meditation. We touch that. And we are praying creatures. The world's oldest temple is 12,000 years old. It's older than Stonehenge. It's older than the Great Pyramids. It was built before metal tools, pottery, writing, or the invention of the wheel. And maybe some of you know about this. Well, there's our connection of light. There it is. Göbekli Tepe. Has anyone heard of this? It's in Turkey. It's considered the world's oldest temple. And what's amazing about this is that the ancient people didn't come here to live. They came here to pray, to gather, to worship together in community. It's been called a Stone Age mountain sanctuary. And I don't know about you, but when I think of a Stone Age person, what comes to your mind when you think of a Stone Age person?
Jim.
Jim. I think of people, scrabbling for food and trying to dodge giant animals and dealing with the weather. But to think that 12,000 years ago, there was a person just like you. There's a community just like us, gathering to pray, to worship, to lift up to the great mystery, something bigger than ourselves. As one, the excavator, Klaus Schmidt, put it, first came the temple, then came the city. The temple drew people to the city. So prayer expands community. Go back to that. A few years ago at a conference, a minister came and told this story. And he'd been serving the church in Nebraska of about 150 people or so. And he got a call one night from the hospital saying, we have one of your congregants here, and she might not make it, so you might want to come down and see her. And he said, okay, sure. And when the nurse told him the woman's name, it didn't ring a bell, but he thought, oh, I'll recognize her when I get there. So he went, and then when he entered her room, he stared at the woman with the white hair and still did not recognize her. And he's trying to figure it out. He thought, well, maybe she attended a long time ago. So he stopped trying to figure it out and took her hand and prayed. And then the next day he called the church administrator and asked, her name was Mary, the woman he had visited, and asked for Mary Small's number. And Mary was not listed in the roster. So he called one of the longtime volunteers who'd been there and knew everybody. And she said, no, I don't know that Mary. So he was really puzzled. And then the funeral director called and said, when would you like to do Mary's service? Her family's coming in on Friday. And he was too embarrassed to admit he didn't know her. So he scheduled the service and did the service, prayed with the family, comforted the family. And afterwards, the son came up and shook his hand and said, thank you, Reverend Joe, for this beautiful service for my mom. Mom talked about you a lot. She talked about you a lot, and she said how inspiring your messages were. Joe blushed. But he decided to fish, and he said, did she come to the 9 o'clock or the 11 o'clock service? And the son said, well, she didn't actually come to service, but she was friends with Mrs. Blake, her neighbor, and Mrs. Blake would come over and tell her all about the service. And he knew Mrs. Blake. Very friendly and outgoing, generous person. And the son said, when Mom lost Pop, Mrs. Blake came over and had everyone at the church praying for her. And then when Mom broke her hip, Mrs. Blake got the prayers going again, and people came over and helped out. He said, when I talked to my mom on the phone, she would say, don't worry that we live so far apart because I have my church family taking care of me. I love that story, true story, because it shows how every act of kindness, every prayer, spoken or unspoken, every act of service, you become someone's answered prayer. That our prayers are answered by people, by God working in people. And we answer other people's prayer by allowing the one, God, to work through us. I almost picture it like Spirit is the divine matchmaker to bring us together, to do good work, to be that love made visible. So I feel like we've been matched. On minister.com. So this week, in silence, words or works, kneeling, standing, or lying face down on the ground, may we go forth as the living prayer. Thank you. Oh, it's in there. Sorry.
Thank you, Reverend Robin, and welcome aboard.
Thank you.
This